Jeff finished that one, but Ian had a question first.
I'm not really clear why the town decided not to rehire Levitsky and Bernie. When was the decision made not to rehire them? Was it before the arrests occurred that the decision was made? And also, you're talking about a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract from the person. Did Levitsky and Bernie have the type of, originally have like a 3-year contract, or were they just a 1-year contract every year? Was it rolled over?
In answer to your first question, came up for the first time, the only time, at the last regular meeting of the Board of Finance. And unfortunately, I don't know the answer to the second question unless Mr. Hallinan.
There were no reasons given when?
It was discussed briefly that we should rebid the contract. Just give me 1 second. Your question was when did we hire them first, or how long was their contract? I'm sorry.
My question was why did you decide not to hire them again? And when you first hired them originally, did they have the kind of contract that rolled over? Was it like a 5-year contract originally, 3-year contract?
It's how long they've been our part of the firm?
Long time, probably over 25, 30 years.
Okay.
So I don't know, what happened way back then.
I think the answer, and the answer is that no vote was ever taken against them. It just seemed to be the consensus of the board that we were dissatisfied with them and wanted to go in a new direction.
Right, so that was at the April 5th meeting.
Right, but there was no lengthy discussion about it. We all reached the same conclusion independently. It was pretty obvious we were going to go in a new direction.
Now, the proposed budget has $25,000 and change for an annual audit and $15,500 for special audit. Why are there two different figures?
Total is $88,000. I didn't bring my budget. I don't know if anyone else did, but that includes a fixed asset audit, which is a couple
I think about 7,000 or 8,000 is for the people committed to fixed assets and their appreciation.
So ballpark 80,000, I believe, is what's in the budget. Jane, I'm going to get to you, but this one in the front row.
Yes, sir. I want to now, 2 weeks later. Have you in fact read the arrest affidavits?
Yes, I have. Yes.
And you're still dragging your heel on a thread. That appalls me. I've read it. It's just so dirty and disgusting. And you're dragging your heels on a forensic audit that is the only way this town is going to know that things are cleaned up. And the other two seem to be reasonable. You seem, and I don't know your motives, but you seem very adverse to this forensic audit.
Actually, I don't think you were listening, ma'am. I said actually that at the next Board of Finance meeting, I would recommend it.
But you're hedging it all in bureaucratic language, like it's not up to you to do it, you're going to make a recommendation. I mean, you could insist, the three of you could insist.
There's obviously dirt. The auditor only has to follow the crumbs. You know, he doesn't have to be directed after you give him one crumb.
I think you're right. I think if we speak with an auditor that we might choose and tell him the areas we'd like to pursue, and he can advise us, or she can advise us on how to get to
I think most people in the town now look at everybody that is an official and thinking, are you a crook too? How will we ever know unless things are looked at? I don't want just 3 crooks out of the government and the rest of them carry on and maybe are a little more careful. It's just, that's not acceptable.
I didn't say it was me, but I think what I said was, as you pointed out, that no, that's not my understanding of the charge. Yes, I think all 3 of us have said we would support a forensic audit, but there's also just a matter of process, and that was the
No process. There's an election coming up. The people want to know who the crooks are before there's an election. That's important.
Let me put it this way. There's been a lot of conversation in town about appropriately bidding contracts. But now what you're suggesting is that we unilaterally go out and hire a forensic firm. That's what you're saying.
No, take it to whatever committees you need, but do it quickly. Make some meetings. Make it happen because it's really upsetting to everyone.
And the 3 of you should be unanimous on this. Or you should be off the board.
You grilled Mr. Hallahan for, we can watch
20
the tape.
minutes.
Do you want to watch the tape on YouTube and see how you grilled Mr. Hallahan for about 15 minutes about why he insisted on a forensic audit?
It'll be
we
up.
already went over this 2 weeks ago.
I have a related question.
If you don't mind, sir, Jennifer's next. I would just like to say that
Board of Finance may not have voted on whether to rehire Fitz Gilberni on April 5th, 2007, but I was on the Board of Finance 4 years ago, and Mr. Fontana and I recommended then we change auditors, and I have recommended as a member of the Board of Selectmen that we change auditors. I talked about Sarbanes-Oxley, and on one vote, Steve and I were 2 votes. We've never succeeded in getting a majority to vote with us.
Yeah. Yes. In your opening remarks, especially the roadblocks that you were setting up for Mr. Hallahan regarding recommending to the Board of Finance that you'd recommend a forensic audit, you said you didn't think that you could do that because you didn't think that was your charge. Okay? Is that true?
That's come several times, so I think.
Is that true?
I think I may have just clear.
Is yes?
You have a question, sir?
Yeah. Is the answer to that question yes or no?
I just answered the question, sir.
Okay.
Let's
Okay,
assume the answer is yes.
Okay. The answer is yes then. Well, did the board also recommend that you conduct sort of a 2-part RFP that has this big operational thing that's a separate project, that's a much larger deal, that's not going to be the part of the same report? Aren't you going beyond the charge of the board when you go and do this separate thing that you weren't told to do? But yet you think you can do that, but not a forensic audit.
Any audit, sir, includes a review of the internal policies and procedures of any entity, whether it's a town or a corporation. Okay? So that is part of the annual audit. I think, yes, it's within the scope to ask firms to do an expansion of that. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
My question is that, actually, Mr. Doheny said that it's possible that this audit committee doesn't have the authority to hire a forensic auditor. Assuming that's the case, does this audit committee have the authority to call a special Board of Finance meeting before the scheduled Board of Finance meeting on May 23rd? And if they do have that authority, why don't they call a special meeting of the Board of Finance as soon as possible so they can get the explicit authority to hire a forensic auditor? And my other question is, Levitsky and Burney also audited West Haven, the city of West Haven, and they failed to uncover many accounting problems, and their audited financial statements were later found to have overstated their assets by over $9 million. And so my question is, did you find out from West Haven who their new auditor was? Did you find out if they had a forensic audit and a general audit? And if, of course they had a general audit, but did you find out whether the firm that they hired to do the forensic audit was different from the general audit? Did you try to find out how much that cost or try to get a sense of or estimate of how much it would cost to have North Haven to do an audit like that? Did you try to find out how long it took them to perform the forensic audit? Because I really think time is of the essence, and if a forensic audit results are made available after the election, then voters really have no recourse. And they should at least, it should be imperative that the results of the forensic audit be available before the election so that voters can take that into consideration before deciding who to vote for.
You've got a couple things there. I guess I would say as a starting point, I would certainly hope that any forensic audit is done well before the elections. Your other question was on a special Board of Finance meeting. My understanding, maybe Mr. Frieder Hallen could clarify, but I believe a special Board of Finance meeting can be called. Although, to be perfectly honest, I don't know the exact procedure for doing so, but yes, I think a special Board of Finance, we already said, quite frankly, that we need to have one in June to get to the process I alleged, or not alleged, but discussed earlier, those milestone dates. As to your question about West Haven, I personally haven't spoken to West Haven. Mike, you've done a lot of work on forensics. Have you talked to West Haven?
I called the West, I did try to speak with the finance director of West Haven. She did not return my call. But CCM is also contacting West Haven and Cromwell to get background on how they handled their issues.
Any comment?
Well, I think